Hi, this is Alex from PHP Academy, and welcome to this introduction on the series of the Chrome developer tools. Now, the introduction serves the purpose to first of all take a look at a website that we have access to Chrome developer tools, but to pretend that we don't have access to Chrome developer tools, and take a look at what it's like to debug a site or find out more detailed information about a page where we can't use Chrome developer tools, or if we don't know how to. So for the purpose of this series, I've created a simple page here. It's just a link with a JavaScript on click event, and we echo out the contents of a particular variable, and we'll be using this particularly in the scripts tab to modify these and take a look at values. So let's take a look at this site as it is. We don't see much, we just see this, and we know that when we click we get this dialog up. Now if we were to not use Chrome developer tools and take a look at this site and find out how this JavaScript works, what styles this page is using, if any, and the markup as well. So if I go ahead and right click, I can choose view page source. We know that we can do this. We can view the source of a web page. We can see the contents of the page that's sent through to us, and we can also see any external files like style sheets. This page doesn't happen to have a style sheet, but for example this JavaScript file here, global.js. Now Chrome highlights this for us, so we can go ahead and click here and we get the contents of this JavaScript file, which is basically an on-click event, and it sets a variable called shout to true, and then it alerts out the value of this variable. So we'll be playing around with this later on without having to modify the source of the page. We're not going to pull up a text editor at all to modify this. We're going to be debugging things and inspecting things from the browser. So we know that we can view the source of a web page, but apart from that we're very, very restricted. So what do we do? Well, that's where Chrome Developer Tools comes in. Now, to open Chrome Developer Tools, we can go to the spanner up here, and we can come down to Tools, and we can come down here to Developer Tools. Now, this will bring up the Chrome Developer Tools window, if you like. Now, you can have this as a separate part instead of it being anchored to the bottom, if you like. So once you've got this open, you might be thinking, what do all these tabs do? What is all this? You can see things flickering in the background there. We're going to be going through these individually, missing out a couple that aren't massively important, but we're going to be explaining pretty much everything that's important in web development. So that's it. We've opened up Chrome Developer Tools. We can go ahead and anchor it again if we like. We'll be taking a look at each of the tabs fairly in depth and picking out the most important things. So this was the introduction to the Chrome Developer Tools, and we're going to start in the next video with the Elements tab. Hi, this is Alex from PHP Academy, and welcome to the first part of the Chrome Developer Tools tutorial. In this part we're going to be looking at the Elements tab. So we are going to be looking through the DOM elements. We are going to be manipulating what's on the page, and we're going to be looking at a few other things as well that are extremely useful to web development. So this is the part where if you're developing a page and you need to change any styles or move anything about on the page, and experiment without having to go ahead and edit your source code and then come back again, this is the part that's really fundamental to that. So I'm using this demo page here, and if you're following along with this tutorial, go ahead and load up this this URL or this page. and I'll go ahead and start to play around with things on here so you can follow along. Now, if you haven't already opened up the Chrome Developer Tools window or the sticky toolbar, you want to go ahead to Tools here and Developer Tools, and you'll see immediately that you'll be presented with the Elements tab. Now, you can also access this by right-clicking on any element on the page or anywhere on the page and clicking Inspect Element. Now, at the moment, I just click within the body area, so this is automatically highlighted the start of the body. For example, if I was to go ahead and right-click on this Submit button and click Inspect, you'll see that we have this button here. So we've got a button element, and so on with other things as well, including text, parts of text as well. So this, in this case, is a paragraph. Okay, so what we can see here is basically all of the elements in the page. As we highlight them in this area here, we can see them highlighting within the window up here. Now, what's important to bear in mind is that anything we change in here, or any styles that we change over here, which we'll be doing a bit later on in this video, will appear in this main window. So we can change things as we see them. So what you see is what you get, essentially. So what we can do is we can view, delete, move things around in here. So let's go ahead and try this out to start with. You can see here that we've got this paragraph element, and this just comes before this button here. Now, if I click and hold this, you can see that I can drag this. You see that line appearing above there, and I can actually release that, and that button will move above that paragraph. Now, obviously, this is just all being done within the browser. Obviously, nothing's changing in the source of the page. That sort of goes without saying. But here is, it's extremely useful, because by being able to do that, I've saved myself having to change a couple of lines of code over. So we can delete things as well. So for example, if I wanted to get rid of this button, I can just go ahead and click delete on my keyboard. We can also right click and delete nodes, copy things, edit them. We'll look at editing in slightly more detail in a moment. Okay, so let's go ahead and refresh. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on something. So for example, this A here. We can actually go ahead and add attributes. Now at the moment there aren't any classes associated with this. There are no IDs associated with this. All we have is a link and a link location here, an href. So what I can actually do is I can go ahead and I can edit certain attributes. I can even add them as well. So let's take a look at adding them first. I'm going to go ahead and just double click anywhere on this, and I'm going to go all the way to the end and hit space. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to type style equals, and I'm going to go ahead and say color red. Now I have added obviously an attribute that we shouldn't use because it's inline styling, but this is just an example. And I've actually changed the color of this to red. Now you also may have noticed it's appeared here. So we can control styles for particular elements here. If we have a class of elements or an ID, for example, we can change the styling of these as well. But back again to the adding attributes, we can go ahead and edit them as well. So for example, if I wanted to edit the location of this link, I can go ahead and type in google.co.uk, for example. Now when I click on this link, it takes me to Google. So let's go back, and you'll notice that our changes have gone. And that's probably another important point. If you're modifying stuff and you click through to links and then back again, your changes unfortunately are going to be lost. It's just sort of on that page as it is. When it's rendered again, you'll lose all them changes that you've made. So now let's go ahead and take a look at changing styles again. If I go ahead and right click on this note here, that we can drag around the page, you'll see that it's got a class of note, and it's also got these styles as well, but that's just because of JavaScript. So let's focus on this pane here now. If we scroll down, you can see that we've got matched CSS rules. Now what we've also got is the user agent style sheet rules, which are the default styles for elements as they appear on a page without any styles. So a div by default will be display block, but of course we can change that with CSS. So for example, this note class here contains this background color property, the height property, padding, position. We can change all these. So if we wanted to, let's just say this was our site. We might want to know how this looks double the width, for example. So the first step would be to do is, if we'd rendered the page here, we could right click inspect. We've now highlighted this note element here, or this div which has a class of note. We can scroll down and we can change the height or the width to anything we like. So let's double the width to 400. Now all I've done is double clicked here, and I can also double click here and change this property. In this case we were just changing the value. So we can now see this as a 400% width element, and that's without going back to our style sheet and changing any styles at all. So what we can also do is add new items to this as well. In actual fact, just a quick note, if you are doing this very precisely, or setting widths or heights very precisely, you can actually use the up and down arrow keys to go ahead and reduce the size and the height of these elements. Well, in fact, any numerical value you can do this with, and percentages as well. So if I was to double click here, or just click in here now, it used to be double click, you can see we can go ahead and add new elements. So for example, I might want to say color, let's say blue. Now what this will do is, when we type in here now, this is changed to blue. It actually doesn't look very blue, it still looks quite dark. So let's go ahead and change this to red. So now you can see that the color of this is red, whereas before, when we didn't have this rule, it was default. It was the user agent's default, which was black. So what we can actually do is go ahead and untick any of these. So I can untick red, and that will go back to the default that it's that's being used. So you can see now that we can change a variety of styles, we can add styles. What we can also do is we can add new style rules in for particular classes. So for example, if I were to add another class here, so note red, note red, you can see that when I hover over this, let's just go ahead and get rid of this. Try and get rid of this. It doesn't seem to want to go. If I was to go ahead and click new style rule, I can go ahead and just set styles for anything with a class of red. So I can say color red. Okay, so let's try that again. So color red. Okay, so now I have added another class within here, so I can test this wherever I want. So for example, if I wanted to set the background color of this input field, this button, to red, I can just go ahead and click anywhere here, go ahead and, oops, not get rid of that, go ahead after this and go class equals red, enter. We've now got this attribute class equals red, and that should have made that red. Sorry, not the background color, the text color. So we now have this class here applied to this and this. So we can create classes within our page and go ahead and test them on different elements. So the limit here, well, there's no limit. It's endless to what you want to do. The only warning I'd say is be careful you don't refresh the page, or you'll lose your changes. So we can also toggle element states. So for example, this new note, well, let's pick one. We'll say this here. When I hover over this element, you see this little button here appears. If I was to go ahead and toggle the element state to hover, you can see that by clicking this, it will bring up this X up here. Now, the reason that this is useful is you can see things like active links focusing on things. So when I hover over this, focusing on something, as well, this is really useful with links, because obviously links have visited states, things like that. In this case, this does not have a different visited state. We could go ahead and fix that by adding a rule in to say a visited, and we could say color red, and we could click on that, and you see it toggles the visited state. So they're the element states that we can basically trigger. Now let's take a look at something else, and that's the partly sort of coming into the box model and the metrics of elements on a page. It's in this sort of accordion tab here. We can see different elements and their heights and widths and the padding within them, the borders, the margin, and the overall size of different elements. So we can already determine the size by inspecting and going ahead and looking at the width and the height of things. But we can use this metrics area to, see the padding. Now the overall size of this is 200 by 250, but we also have 10 pixels of padding. We have no border as such, because this isn't showing anything. If, for example, we were to have a border, which we could actually go ahead and add in here. So we could either add it in here hard as an inline style, or we could add it to note. We could say border 1px solid and black, and that's now added a black border. In fact, let's go ahead and add this as 10 pixels. Oops. Yeah, sometimes it can get a little bit tricky to draw. Okay, so we've got a 10 pixel border. Let's go over to metrics, and you'll see that when I hover over border, the whole border highlights. So we've got the padding inside, which is 10 pixels, the border, which is 10 pixels, the overall, which is 200 by 250. We've got no margin on this because these are blank, there's nothing. So that's it. We can look at the metrics of objects, make sure they're the right size, particularly with the box model where padding will push an element's size outwards. So for example, an element with 100 by 100 with 10 pixel padding will end up being 110 by 110. So we can do that. Another really useful aspect of the Elements tab, and I know this is quite long, but these are all the really, really useful things that are going to allow you to see what you wouldn't normally on a page, is the search. So we can go ahead and search things. So for example, if I knew there was a class name or an ID name of new notes button, or new notes button, I can go ahead and search for that, and it will bring up different results. So there's one of two matches. We've got a bit of JavaScript down here that we've also searched. So we've got some inline or on-page JavaScript, and there we go. We have searched and found 2 of 2 matches. Another thing to bear in mind when you are looking at the page, let's just go ahead and refresh this back to its original state and get rid of that search, is the breadcrumbs at the bottom. Now let's just say we have, let's try and find an inner element. We'll say the timestamp down here. Now you can see that the timestamp's on the end, and this is highlighted blue. Now we've got, this is within div.note, so it's a div element, and it has a class of note, which is within body, which is within HTML, which is the document. Body is the body area of the page, the display area, and the note here is the note that's floating around the page, and the timestamp is within the note. So it's sort of a breadcrumb trail of elements. So it's really useful to find out if you have a lot of elements on a page nested within each other. It's really useful to find out exactly where these lie within the page, and that's another really useful point of this. There's many other things that we can do within here, but I implore you to go and have a look around and search around this, it becomes extremely easy to develop and see things like drop down option values and test things when they're selected in drop down fields. There's a variety of things that you can do with this. So that's the Element tab in Chrome Developer Tools. It's one of the most useful. It's where you'll spend most of your time as a developer, but go ahead and play around with it, and you'll probably become a better developer for being able to simply get things done a lot quicker. Hi, this is Alex from PHP Academy. In this video we're going to be looking at the Resources tab. So this is the next part on. We've already looked at the Elements tab in the last part. We're going to be looking at Resources, and it's very brief. There's not really a lot to explain, but it's really important to look in here to see essentially what's on your page. Let's go ahead and hit the Resources tab. I'll expand this slightly just so we can see the different aspects here. Go ahead and refresh the page. Now, the first thing you'll notice is that we have things like index.html, which is obvious. It's the page that we're currently browsing. We've got things like delete button, which I'm sure you can guess what it is. It's the button up here, you see. So it tells us the resources that are being loaded in. We've got this overall root. We've got an images folder, which is delete button.png. So for example, if we were to go images/delete button.png, oh, sorry, there we go. No, that's not a folder. Sorry, folder here, and then images are just images on the page. So you can see the URL for that there. My mistake. So not only can we view the source here in a friendly syntax highlighted way, we can obviously go and inspect other parts of this page as well. We'll be looking at that. So we've already seen images. This is a very, very basic page. We've just got some markup. We've got some styles here, and we have got some HTML5 local storage as well, which is really useful because we can go ahead and look in this databases part here. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. I'm going to expand this note test thing here, and I'm going to click on WebKit Sticky Notes. Now you'll see that we've got the value of note here set to hello. So if you've worked with HTML5 and you've looked at local storage, if we go ahead and change this to hello there, that's now been saved. So when I refresh the page, this stays the same. If I go ahead to note test again, you'll see that this value's changed. So if you are experimenting with HTML5, looking at local storage, things like that, this is again extremely useful, and it will give you timestamps of things as well. We've also got value, well, that's been saved. We've also got left top here, which has also been stored by this application, which allows us to see the location of this. But again, all this data has been stored, so don't expect it to just appear for your applications. Okay, so why do we use this Resources tab? Well, I'll be honest, it's not one of the most common things that I would use. However, if I'm trying to find a list of, say, images that have been pulled through, it's a really good way to see sort of collated data. So everything that's been pulled in from the page, you can see it in one long list, and they're all grouped. So images are grouped, style sheets are grouped, normal pages are grouped. So that's a really, really good thing to bear in mind as well. We've also got the Cookies tab, which is relatively useful. We've got this site has no cookies at the moment. However, if we were to go over to google.co.uk, and we'll go ahead and just, I always do a shortcut to inspect element like that. So that's just how I get over to the Chrome Developer Tools. The spanner seems just the long way to do it. Okay, so we'll go over to Resources, and you'll see here that we've got some cookie information that's stored here. So you know, that's just another really useful thing about the resources tab. So not really much to see here, it's all very self-explanatory, but that's some useful points about this. We've looked at this HTML5 local storage example and how we can pull up some of the information. We've looked at the grouped images, which this will group other things as well, like style sheets, and we have just had a look around and looked at cookies as well. So that's the resources tab in Chrome Developer Tools. Okay, so in this part we are going to be looking at the scripts tab. I've created a small JavaScript, small piece of JavaScript code that's going to allow us to demonstrate this. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at this piece of code, we're going to be inspecting some of the variable values, we're going to be changing the JavaScript, we're also going to be stepping through the program as well. So we'll be able to sort of play around with the JavaScript. And it's extremely useful, as well as being able to see all the scripts on our page and search through them. So we've got the blank page here. I'm going to go ahead and right click and inspect, and I'm going to head over to the scripts tab. Now the only script that we're using at the moment is global.js. If we want to see the rest, we can go ahead and click this script navigator. You can see here that global.js is the only one. So let's go ahead and focus on global.js. Now, first of all, what happens when we click on this click here? Well, we're getting this element by ID, so we know that when we inspect this, it's got an ID of click here. So we know that when we click on this, so on click, we run an anonymous function. We set a variable with the name shout to the value true, and then we alert out this value. So in this case, when we click on it, click here, it'll just say true. Okay, that's fairly obvious. So a simple 4-line piece of code. Now, what happens if we want to experiment with the behavior of this? What happens if we don't know the value of a particular variable? Say we had a 300-line JavaScript code. We would need to sort of dive in here and look at things in a bit more detail. And we can also set conditions as well. So the first thing that we're going to do is go ahead and inspect the value of these variables. So I'm going to go ahead here and click pause, and I'm going to click here. Now what's happened is it has stopped at this point on the page. So here we haven't clicked on anything yet, and nothing's been set, so we're essentially paused on the first line. It gives us lots of information here, but we're going to be focusing on looking at these particularly local variables here. So the variable shout is undefined currently. We know it's there, but it's undefined. What we can do is step through this program, so we can step through line by line. So as I step onto the next line, shout's still undefined, but when we get to the next line, because of this statement here, it's been set to true. So now after we've finished executing alert shout, we know that when we step into the next, it says we have an alert box saying true, or alert dialog saying true. And then we're at the end of our program, nothing left to do. So we can actually go ahead and modify the functionality of our application directly. So I could go ahead, for example, highlight true, change this to false, and go ahead and save it. You can see we've got a little star here, so I'm going to go ahead and press Control and S, and that saved that. So what we can now do is I'm going to go ahead and, in fact, let's refresh and do this. So I've refreshed the page. I'm going to go ahead and highlight this, type in false, save that out, go ahead and click here, and that has changed our application. What we could also do is we could also say the value of shout is, Control and S, click here, the value of shout is false. So we can modify this in any way that we would normally modify it within our code. it's just, again, like the CSS modifications, the HTML modifications. It's just a lot easier than doing it in your code. And you also have the added benefit that we can go ahead and inspect the value of different variables and step through our program. So we're now going to look at the breakpoint, and we're going to add some conditions based on this. So for example, I'm going to add a breakpoint here, and I'm going to edit the breakpoint to add a condition. Now, why am I doing this? Well, when you're creating a JavaScript application, you might want to go ahead and set specific conditions in here based on variable values. Again, just a lot easier than going ahead over to your code and doing this. And this is also really great for debugging as well, with different variable values and return values, things like that. So the breakpoint on line 2 will stop only if this expression is true. So I'm going to say if shout is equal to true. We use the triple equals. So when I go ahead and click here, it has paused on this breakpoint because shout is equal to true. So we've paused on this breakpoint, and our condition, remember, is it will pause on the breakpoint if shout is equal to true, because shout is equal to true. So I'm going to go ahead and change this. Let's go ahead and refresh again. I'm going to go ahead and change this to false, save it. I'm going to edit the breakpoint, and I'm going to say only break at this point if shout is equal to true. Now, you've probably guessed it, when I click on here, it runs the script. There's no breakpoints. We haven't stopped at any breakpoints, and that's because the condition wasn't met. So if you're looking at your program and thinking, oh, I really wish there was an easy way to debug this with the variable values that I've got within the browser, I don't want to go ahead and add, a ton of loads of, if statements and stuff to check certain things, go ahead and use debug within here. It's extremely straightforward. Again, it's one of them things you need to play around with to get used to, but you can go ahead and modify things, set breakpoints, set conditions for breakpoints. So that's essentially the script tab in Google Chrome Web Developer Tools. Okay, so welcome back. In this part of the tutorial, we are going to look at auditing our page. Now, this is going to be a very quick tutorial part because we're not actually going to go in and make any changes based on the audit, but I'm going to show you what an audit looks like, how to run one, and also how to pick up some of the information that you might see. So I'm going to go ahead and open Developer Tools, either by my option in the spanner here, or by right-clicking and inspecting an element and then navigating over as desired. I'm going to go over to the Audits tab now. Since we haven't looked at this, let's go ahead and just pull it up slightly. Now, what is auditing? Well, auditing is a really great feature built in here to basically check your website and how you can improve it, how you can improve certain aspects of the site, particularly with a focus on speed as well. You've got this network here and web page performance, and we can go ahead and either audit a present state or reload the page and audit on the load. Now, this is great for obviously, as I said, speeding up your site. So what we can do is we can reload the page and audit on reload. Go ahead, click run. It loads in all the resources, it checks certain things, and it gives you a list of things that you can do, basically. So the reds are obviously the higher priorities. So for example, enabling gzip compression, that will just compress stuff before it's sent to you, and then uncompress. So it just basically allows certain resources to be downloaded a lot quicker. Here we've got leverage browser caching, so things that aren't cached that should be cached perhaps. Proxy caching, minimum cookie size, it will tell you the average size for all cookies on the page. CSS that should be in the document head. If there's any CSS anywhere else, it will warn you about that as well, because obviously that degrades site performance, because then that CSS either can't be cached or is in within the markup. Remove unused CSS rules. Now this is brilliant. If you're using CSS on a page that's specific to a page and things are unused, it will tell you certain elements, and it's great. So there's a variety of things that will come through here on an audit that you can follow through, take a look at, and start to actually improve the speed of your site. It's one of them things that's so easy to do, and it basically tells you what to do, and that's what I really like about this. So that's the very short introduction and short explanation of the Audits tab in Chrome Developer Tools. But after you've finished developing, or of course during development, a really, really useful thing to get your page up to scratch. Okay, so we are over to the Console tab in Chrome Developer Tools. We're going to look through this, why it's useful, and we're going to be playing around with a few elements on a page as well in terms of JavaScript. Now, last but not least, because it's an extremely important part of development, mainly through JavaScript, because it's really, really good at showing you any errors that have occurred on a page. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going ahead and forcing an error, and we're going to be examining this in the console, and also looking at why we might suffer if we weren't using this console. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. I'm going to open up my text editor. I'm going to go ahead over to global.js. Now I've already added this line, which I'll be explaining at some point. Now, for example, if I forget to include this bracket, or include sort of like a dot, or something silly like that, for example without the semicolon at the end of this line, where we set the value of shout to true, I'm going to go ahead and refresh and click here. Sorry, I'm going to go ahead and do something a bit worse. I'm going to go ahead and click there. Nothing's happening. Now, there's nothing worse than the behavior that you have written into your program to not work as expected. So what can I do without the script? I could go ahead and view the page source. I could look here. I could look through my source code for hours and hours, which I don't want to do. So I'm going to go ahead and load up the console, and we already can see an error here. Now, if we're not on here and we're just on elements, for example, we still get this little error down here. And there's a tooltip which you can't quite see in the screencast with one error. So it tells us we've got one error. I'm going to go ahead and just double click on this, and lo and behold, the actual console pops up here. And we can use the console on any of these pages, because it's really flexible and allows us to do certain things while we're doing other things as well. And you'll see why it's so useful in just a moment. So we have an unexpected token here. It tells us the line that it's on as well, which is line 3. And brilliantly, if we click on this, it takes us through to here in the resources tab, which we've already looked at. And it gives us the error where it's happened. So we can see the error where it's happened. Now this is useful because although we might have missed something because we just haven't seen it, and it's hard to pick things up, we can now see that, oh yeah, I can see that there's a bracket missing there now because this error has been displayed, where this is. So we can go and correct that, and that is a brilliant way to go ahead and debug JavaScript if it's just small errors. So that's one of the reasons, or one of the really good ways that we can use this, and really useful things that we can do with this. The other thing is logging to the console. Now, if I go over to the console, you can see we've got done here, and that's because I've added this line, console.log. Now, when you're creating a program and you want to log things at certain stages to get some information back for yourself or for the user, there might be an error. You can actually use the log to log certain things. So at this point, I've just logged done for no reason, and that just happens after the alert dialog. But obviously you can log more advanced things, for example, units, values. If you're doing anything mathematical, you might want to log that back to the console so you can keep an eye on things as you're writing and testing any programs. So that's another really useful thing to do as well. Obviously we've already looked at errors, but we can also manipulate or run JavaScript on this page. So for example, when we click here, we have this variable, which is, if we go over to scripts, shout, and we alert that out. Fair enough. Now what happens if we want to go ahead and manipulate this? Well, I can go ahead and say var shout is equal to false. Go ahead and run that. Fine. Click here and oh, of course, sorry, we can't do that because when we click it sets the value already. So instead, let's go ahead and just alert something out. So for example, I could alert out hello, and there we go. We can see something. So I could even alert shout, and it's false because we've already set it false here. So we can do a variety of things in the console with JavaScript. What we can also do is we can target elements, and we can do this really easily with the following syntax. So for example, we could force this event. So this here, if we inspect it, has an ID of click underscore here. So I could say hash click underscore here dot click. And what this will do is it will force the event. So when I press enter, oops, oh no, sorry. There we go. So I've just typed in the ID here and it said true. The reason it's true is because I forced the click event here of this element here. So that's another way to do it. I could also go ahead and say click underscore here dot inner HTML is equal to oops, click me. Oops, sorry. Let's just go ahead and copy this again. There we go. So it's changed. So we can change things on the page as well. Now that's obviously not entirely useful because we can do that through clicking here. But you can now see that we can utilize the power of controlling JavaScript in our own way, outputting things how we want, modifying things within JavaScript, and we can also modify the DOM using JavaScript to perhaps test things that we might want to implement with JavaScript later on. So that's the console. It can appear in its own tab, or you can have it open in any other tab that you want to open in Chrome Developer Tools. So that's the console tab in Chrome Developer Tools. Yeah.